Hey guys, and welcome back to another week of Porsche Cup at the Belle circuit in Detroit. My name's Matt Emery. You're here watching Coach Dave Academy for another hot lap and hot lap guide. So let's get into the video. So let's get the lap guide then for the Belle circuit. Very twisty, very tight circuit. A bit different to any other ones on the calendar really for this season and tracks we've covered so far. But heading down the pit straight then. Now for a qualifying lap, for example, I take a nice wide line onto the entry to the lap, just to get that more momentum going across the start-finish line. You might gain a couple hundredths on it. Obviously, that's in qualifying. You want to take a bit of a shorter, more optimum route for your race laps. But going across the start-finish line then, and into turn one. Now this is a very tricky braking zone, especially on cold tyres. Very easy to lock up your front right. So you're looking at braking just before this 300-meter board. You just see there. You're braking quite early for this corner, so you see I'm on the gas on the brake. Sorry, quite early, and then you can sort of aim for this curb. It does unsettle the car slightly, so don't get too far on it. Especially don't make sure you're not touching the grass as well. And then just carrying the speed again on the throttle as early as you can. And then into turn two. So a bit of a fast chicane to open up the lap. Probably the quickest corners on the circuit, really. Again, sticking it nice and close to the curb and not getting too far onto it, as it will just unsettle the car and you'll drift wide into the outside barrier. So you can see I'm making sure I'm carrying that minimum speed through turn one. Make sure I'm not going too far to the left here, so I can open up this left-hander. And then onto the second straight. Now on the exit of this corner, also you can see a bit of a crest here, and the car does go light, and obviously the rear end will stick out in that situation. So be really careful when you get on the throttle here. You see I'm just getting as close to that wall as you can. Obviously don't touch the wall. Gets very close, but yeah, make sure you don't crash into it. You see the car gets light there, just as you head over that crest. You see the rear end does stick out slightly. But then it's all good, so I'm going to touch the wall, you can get away with that. Now it's a very bumpy braking zone coming into turn three. Again, braking quite early, very easy to lock your front tyres. And actually you'll notice, I think I changed my brake bias slightly to the rear here, just before the corner. Yeah, you can see, if you look to the bottom right here, see I make a slight adjustment to the brake bias. Just to the rear of the car, so the front doesn't lock. And you make it into the corner. So back into chase cam now. You're looking to brake just between the 400 and 300 meter board, just as it is quite bumpy. You want to make sure you get into the apex without locking your tyres, basically. So heavily onto the brakes. nearly 100% there, you can see on the left-hand side. Getting up to nearly maximum pressure and then coming straight back off it and trail braking into the apex. Now you can actually get away with touching quite a lot of this curb. You can get on the grass a little bit as well. So that's something I suggest you look into doing. And then onto the exit curb as well. So again, I'll just show that for you. Braking just after the 400 meters into the apex, and then back on the power as early as you can, using all the exit curb as well. As I say, look out for your front tyres locking. Very easy to do. I think I move my brake bias to click to the rear, just to help with the front locking. So if you are struggling with front locking, that's what I suggest you change. Come on to turn 4 then, and this comes into a very technical section of the track. You go over this sort of curb and grass, and you can see you get right on this grass here. That's absolutely fine. The game won't give you an off track for that. So use as much curb as you can. And again, this Porsche car quite likes using the curbs, so you can get away with that. Obviously, an open wheel, F3 or F4, you probably want to be avoiding the curbs. But in this car, it's absolutely fine. And then getting back on the power as close as you can to the walls. And that's going to be a bit of a theme with this track, really. Getting really bold and brave with the barriers and seeing how close you can get it without hitting them. Back over to the right-hand side, again, not leaving too much margin. The track actually opens up slightly. You'll see the barrier opens up towards the corner. So getting as far to the right as you can, and then there's a nice curb on the left that you're aiming for into the apex. There, so you're just aiming for the edge of this curb here. Just get your wheel onto that. Obviously, the curb is quite high, but again, this car doesn't mind doing that at all. So yeah, onto the brakes. Your brake marker for here, we'll say, is about this lamppost here. There's not too much other references to use, other than obviously the track going slightly wider as well. So if you look for references, then use this lamppost here. Again, into the corner, getting onto the curb, but not too much. And then you'll find actually on the exit in the cockpit view, you'll see what I mean. The wall sort of sticks out a bit here. I don't know, it's the bottom of the barrier, so the pavement actually sticks out a bit. And you'll notice I get really close to that, and you can see I'm fighting the car. The rear end's sticking out, and you're basically aiming nearly to touch that barrier, just to make sure you get on the throttle. You see I'm at the apex, back on the throttle, just playing with the car, feathering the throttle a bit and getting as close to that barrier as you can. So I'll just play that through for you once more. Opening up the corner, get onto the curb, aiming for that bit of pavement. I got very close that time. You don't want to get much closer than that. And then again, back over to the left-hand side. You can brake a bit later, as it's slightly uphill, you can see. Obviously, just making sure you're getting back over to the left-hand side, using as much of the track as you can to open up the next corner, which is onto the back straight. So it's a fairly simple 90-degree. You see I'm getting quite a lot of lock on here as well, just to really scrub the fronts and get them into the corner. So let's have another look at that. It's also, I've noticed with this corner, I had a few times in practice, the bottom of this barrier, the pavement, sticks out slightly more than the barrier, and what you'll find, you can sometimes get a bit too close. You'll start riding the pavement, which will unsettle the car. So that's just about as you want to be. Obviously, narrowing the corner as much as you can without touching the pavement or the barrier. So yeah, as I say, you don't get too close, as it will bite quite heavily and unsettle the car. You see, obviously opening up the corner, not getting too close to the barrier. And then just back on the throttle, open it up as much as you can to the barrier. And the more you can, the more confidence you have, you've really got to be careful with practice here. The more practice you do and the more confidence you gain, the quicker you're going to get. And you'll find, obviously, the more preparation you put in, you're going to be much, much stronger. And just learning where those references are, how close you can get to the barriers, just learning the characteristics of the track, really important, especially for a street circuit like this. So getting back on the power as early as you can, and onto the back straight. Quite a bumpy part of the track as well. You'll notice there's quite a few bumps and notches as you go down into the next braking zone. And again, this is probably one of the trickiest braking zones on the track. Just as when you're going into your braking, the track slightly goes left, so you naturally follow that line. And obviously, if you're putting lateral force onto the car, or you're braking in a straight line, it's going to be slightly easier to lock the tyres. So that is something, again, to look out for. So coming into the braking zone, your reference is just before the 400 meters. So you can see the 400 meter boards on the left and right hand side, and also this bridge above as well. So I'm getting on the brakes about 50 meters, maybe a bit less before the 400 meters. Just make sure I get all my braking done in a straight line as much as you can, and then obviously opening up the corner as well. You see I'm getting right, tucking it into this left hand side, just opening up the corner as much as you can. Into the apex as well. You can use this curb on the inside. Once just going too far over, just as you're going to unsettle the car. I think the car actually does bottom out slightly. I found in practice. So you get onto the curb using about half the amount, I'd say. That's quite a good amount. And what you'll find if you use too much, you'll drift a bit wide, and then you won't be able to get on the power as early. So braking, as I said, play that through for you again. Just before the 400 meters, into the corner, keep it nice and central in the middle of the track as you're going to get back over to the right hand side for the next left hand 90-degree corner. So over the curb there, back on the power, and then getting really brave with the barrier on the entry, just as it also does open up when you get into the corner. So you're sort of aiming your car for this little bit that sticks out here. You can see that there, so you're just aiming to get your car just wrapped around there and then open up this next corner. Again, a lot of lock on there. I'll run that through you again. And then it's very important for this corner, as I say, there's a nice bit of cam you can use on the inside there. You can see the track dips down a bit. And if you get into that, the car really likes it and it will stick to the apex a lot better. So really aiming for this section of the track with your front left. And that will help carry the car around. And you'll find a lot of lap time from doing that. I wouldn't suggest touching the curb really, as it is quite a high curb. Obviously, I know it's okay for other sections of the track because it's such a slow corner. You just lose traction, and you're going to get wheel spin. The car's going to be unbalanced, so I'd suggest just get into this section of the track here, maybe slightly touching the curb. Back on the power as early as you can. The rear end does stick out a bit, struggling for traction. Opening up this next double left-hander will be very tricky. You have to be very patient with the throttle for this double left. So you see, I'm not quite touching the inside here. I'm just running it around just to open up the second part of the corner. So the entry, opening it up as much as you can. Carrying the speed, just feathering the throttle. Not using the brake really at all here. Slight dab of the brake there. And getting it nice and into this next part of the track. And really what you're aiming for here is just to open up this next hairpin. So it's also a one corner, this double left. You're going as wide as you can to cut back into the left. Now it's up to you whether you want to use this curb or not. I did in this instance. You could also, an alternate line, come a bit wider, cut back to the left without using the curb, which would open up the corner even more. But then you do sacrifice a bit of entry speed, which would lose you a little bit of time there. Again, as I say, you'll find what works for you, and you'll find your references throughout the week. And obviously, as you practice, you'll get more and more comfortable with what works for you. But yeah, this is what I chose to do. I thought this is quickest. And you see, I'm getting on the brakes just after this curb, just after I come off the curb here, just before this wall here that sticks out. And I'm trying to open up the corner as much as possible. And really tuck into this apex as well. Now, you can't see from this angle, if I go into cockpit cam, you can't really see, but there's a slight bit of camber. If you go slightly wide of the apex, it's really difficult to find traction and grip on the exit, and you'll notice on your lap time you will lose 2 or 3 tenths just by not making this apex. And you notice how much lock I'm using. I'm opening up this corner as much as I can. You see all the lock I'm chucking on here, and what that does is drags me to the left, opens up the right-hander, put all the lock on again, and I'm just trying to cut the corner sort of as shallow as I can. You don't want to be using this part of the track at all. You can sort of see it from that angle, but it's very bumpy. It's also a horrible bump here, which you also avoid by taking this line. So you notice I'm getting it on the power, sort of squaring off the corner, and then see again right back on the power, and the traction actually wasn't too bad there. But you'll see what I mean from when you do a few laps yourself. It's a very tricky corner to get right, and you see I could have got on the power a bit earlier there, run it out a bit wider, but just by squaring off the corner and taking a narrower route, a more straight exit, and also avoiding the bumpy part of the track, you just get a lot better traction. So try your best just to minimise using this part of the track. And then I get on the power, straight line it out to the wall, and then we come into the final few corners of this track. Now this is another very tricky high-speed corner to get right. You see you're braking just before this 200-meter board on the left-hand side here, and you see I'm pretty much inside the barrier. In fact, my wing mirror is touching the barrier. Just opening up this corner as much as you can. Don't use this curb on the right-hand side, just as you can see how high the curb is, and it just unsettles the car, and it's going to just drift you out and chuck you towards the barrier. But as close as you can to the bottom of the curb. Similar to the last couple of corners, you don't really want to be touching the curbs here. But you see, pretty much inside the barrier there, you can see the sparks flying off. Carrying the speed through, getting as close to this left-hand side as I can, just to open up this final corner. Back on the throttle, and then out towards the wall again. So I'll just break that down slightly more for you. Braking just about the 200-meter board. Into the the penultimate corner, not quite touching the curb. Getting out to the wall, and then this is, again, you're feathering the throttle for this final corner. Slight touch of the brake there as well, just to get the front nose in. Back on the throttle, again, try not to touch this curb, as it will just throw you towards the barrier. You can't really risk doing that for this sort of high-speed corner. So make sure you just into it again. There's this nice bit of camber in the road you can use. And then back on the throttle, as wide as you can towards the barrier. And for a qualifying lap, I tend to take the shortest route to the line. So you see I'm getting very close to that barrier there and cut it to the line. Now obviously for a race lap, you just want to be taking your usual racing line. So just follow the groove and obviously open up your turn one. So that was the hot lap guide and hot lap for this week 6 at Detroit with the Belle circuit. I hope that was really useful. Hope there were some tips and tricks you learned. Obviously quite a tricky track compared to the ones that we've had previously this season so far. Obviously, make sure you check out the Discord for Coach Dave Academy and also go to coachdaveacademy.com for more data packs and videos like this. But yeah, my name's Matt Emery. Hope you enjoyed the guide and I will see you next week. Take care.